Turn off the water and set the tank lid aside. Make a mark on the inside of the tank at the current water level. Next to it, write HW. Make another mark after flushing the toilet. Call it LW. Make a third mark to show the height of the old flush valve's overflow tube and call it OT. Now you can remove the rest of the water, disconnect the water supply line from the fill valve, and take out the fill valve. Take off the bolts and nuts that hold the tank on the bowl and remove gasket. You'll probably need a large pair of adjustable locking pliers to remove the nut from the flush valve. Loosening the nut from the tank lever is a little different than normal. It's reverse threaded, which means you'll have to turn the nut clockwise to get it off. Now you're ready to install your new dual flush system. Installation starts with the dual flush valve. First, take off the refill mount. Making sure the washer is in place, insert the new flush valve into the tank. Find the spot on the overflow tube that matches the line you drew and labeled OT, then pull the valve back out of the tank. Cut the overflow tube so that the height of the dual flush valve without the refill mount matches the dimension you measured on your old valve. Don't cut below the second segment on the overflow tube. Reinsert the refill mount, making sure that once the valve is back in the tank, the refill mount is low enough to allow the lid to fit over the tank properly, but high enough to allow a minimum of 2 inches clearance between the top of the overflow tube and the top of the refill mount. If necessary, you can shorten the corrugated refill hose and cut the bottom end of the refill mount, but do not cut the lever attachment cable. Insert the flush valve into the tank. Hand tighten, taking care to keep the valve in the same orientation as shown here. To install the fill valve, you'll need the shank washer and lock nut. With the washer in place on the shank, insert the fill valve into the tank. The top should be about 3 inches higher than the overflow tube. To adjust the height of the fill valve, take it out of the tank and twist the threaded shank. Do not release the lock ring to adjust shank. To secure the fill valve, hand tighten the nut. Do not over-tighten. Run the handle lever through the square hole on the tank and hand tighten the reverse threaded lock nut. Turn it counterclockwise. Make sure the tabs on the collar are aligned vertically. Match the tabs on the lever to the slots on the lever mounting base and snap them together. Slide the provided rubber gasket over the threaded flush valve end. Use old gasket if the new one doesn't fit. As you reattach the tank to the bowl, make sure the tank is level. Do not over-tighten the bolts. Attach the refill hose from the fill valve to the nipple on the side of the dual flush valve, making sure the hose doesn't hinder the movement of the fill valve float and arm or the flush valve floats and overflow tube. Once installed, if you need to adjust the orientation of the flush valve, turn the valve counterclockwise to unlock its tabs, then remove the valve and adjust as needed. As you can see on the chart provided with your printed instructions, there are a number of possible water supply connections out there. If you need a new cone washer or coupling nut, they were included with the system. You may use Teflon tape on the threads, but don't use plumber's putty. Do not over-tighten. Turn on the water and check for leaks. Maximizing your performance and water saving takes just a few adjustments. When the fill valve turns off, compare the water level in the tank to the higher line you drew and labeled HW. If necessary, use the adjustment screw at the end of the float control arm to match the water's fill level to the mark. Turning the screw clockwise raises the water level. Turning it counterclockwise will reduce the amount of water allowed into the tank. To set the valve for a proper half flush, pull out the stop on the blue float and raise it to the top of the rail. Do a test flush by putting a piece of toilet tissue 1 foot long into the bowl and lifting the flush lever. If the flush does not remove the paper, lower the blue float 1 notch. Wait for the tank to refill. Continue lowering the setting on the blue float until the toilet tissue flushes fully. The higher you can keep the blue float while still getting an effective flush, the more water you can serve. Engage the stop to lock the position of the blue float. Push down on the flush lever to activate the full flush. If the level on the remaining water in the tank is lower than your previous low water mark labeled LW, raise the gray float and repeat. If the low water level is higher than your previous mark, lower the float and repeat. Engage the stop to lock the position of the gray float. With this roller clamp, you can make sure you're not putting too much water in the bowl. There's a maximum amount of water your toilet bowl needs. If, after flushing, the fill valve is still running when water in the bowl reaches this point, any additional water diverted to the bowl is wasted over the trap and down the drain. If the fill valve shuts off before the water has reached this point, you may not have enough water in the bowl to achieve an effective flush, at which point you'll flush again. This also wastes water. Because you can't see the inside of the toilet like this, here's a way to find the correct level for your toilet. Start by dumping a gallon of water into the bowl and letting the water settle. Make a mark at the water level. If after flushing the fill valve is still running when the water in the bowl reaches your mark, you'll want to decrease the water entering the bowl by rolling the clamp to a lower number. If the valve shuts off before the water has reached your mark, roll the clamp to a higher number. Congratulations, you're all done. With your new FluidMaster Dual Flush system, you can save water and money for years to come without sacrificing performance.